I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go. Thought that I'd just drop by and let you know that I'm leaving town tomorrow. I'll cause you no more sorrow. I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go. Like the lawyer said to do, it won't replace all the heartaches I've caused you. It won't take the place of loving you, I know. I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go.
Testing, testing. Says I have sound. Welcome back to the channel, Grand Colombia, coming live from Armenia, Colombia, and welcome to Coffee Time Live, the longest running live show on YouTube. So I say. Today, I'm going to cover a bit of news. Get your questions ready. We'll cover them pretty quick. But I got hit with a little wave of nostalgia, and it's funny because Wednesday, I think it was, I got an email asking me, he's going to be retired soon. And he said, his question was, do you sit around, you know, as you're retired and think about the past all the time? And are you nostalgic all the time? And actually, no. I don't think about things any different than I ever have. You know, what am I going to be doing? I'm always planning something. But today I go in the shower to get ready for this, and I got a little, like an Alexa tablet, and I put on YouTube, and it was a mix I'd never listened to before, but it actually popped up, and it said music from the Vietnam War. Oh, that'd be interesting. So I put that on. And I got hit with some nostalgia. And so I'll talk about that in a bit. And I have some news. I'm going to talk about the taxi strike. Got a number of questions about that. Quickly, Rob, good morning. How you doing? Juka, hello, thank you, as always. Turtle, Yoda. Okay. Owen Cash, what is Kenny Rogers in the first edition? I'll get to that. Mike, sound, video, okay. Awesome. It had shut itself off for some reason I have no idea why. And Mike, how you doing? How's my little country plot out there waiting for me? Okay. So I put this music on and brushing my teeth first, and I'm going to jump in the shower. And of course, Paint It Black comes on. You know, that's probably one of the most famous ones. I think there was some movie that used that as a theme or something. So that got me, you know, I start thinking about things as I'm getting ready. And then a song came on a little later. And it was all awesome songs, by the way. I don't like Creedence Clearwater Revival, but there's a couple songs I like, and they happen to play the ones that I like, so that was pretty cool. This song comes on a little later, and it's I Wonder Why by Dion and the Belmonts. I don't know if you remember it, but it was back with the doo-wop music. So I'm thinking, oh yeah, Vietnam, early. Then I'm thinking, well, my brother, who's 10 years older, died of the same cancer I had 10 years before I got it. He went to Vietnam. He joined the Marines at 17. he went to Vietnam 1963, and he was there till 1964. And I teased him he was a grunt. He was actually in some electronic specialty thing, but I always teased him that he was a grunt. And so he was there for quite a period of time. And essentially that was when things began. That's prior to the big buildup. So I used to say he opened the door to Vietnam. And I joined the Marines at 19. I had things to do. And I hadn't even decided if I was going to. Of course, when I joined, they had the lottery by then, and my number came up. So either way, I was going to go. I mean, either run to Canada, which was kind of popular at the time, and actually had part of my life in Canada, or, get drafted or join something. Well, I couldn't really stomach the idea of running off to Canada. It really bothered me. So I figured if I'm going to join, I'll join the best one, because at the time you could get guarantees, or so they said. I didn't get my guarantee, but I'm thankful that I didn't. I did get aviation, so I got my guaranteed group. I wanted to be air traffic controller, and thank God I wasn't. So what does all this have to do with Colombia? Very little, except a lot of people that watch this channel are going into retirement, and these are questions, they're legitimate questions. Like, they haven't experienced retirement before, and so what happens? Do you fall into these never-ending pits of nostalgia? And for me, no, it's not like that at all. But today, I think memories get triggered by people all the time. I mean, when you're 25, you can have memories of when you were in high school and something happened, and it was that sort of thing. So it kind of triggered that, and I'm remembering all of these things. And then it led me to, your brain kind of goes off in the left field. And I was remembering somewhere, I'm guessing 14, maybe 15. I left home at 15, so it was just prior to that. I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I think it's probably typical. Maybe it's common. Maybe it's not. But when I was 13, 14, 15, I had so much energy. It felt like I was exploding with energy. And so you would go out and you would just run until you were exhausted, or you would just do things you kind of put that energy somewhere. Well, I remember getting ready for school, and the song came in that I liked, but I went into this crazy, I would say dance, but it wasn't really dance. It was just this wild thrusting gyrations, craziness to the song by Kenny Rogers, Just Dropped In. Now, what amazes me is that throughout my life, I remember that song from time to time. And I really liked that song, even though it was contrived and, it was a commercial effort, and they put in, certain phrases and words, and, got to put 8 Mile in there and all these things. I get that. I didn't care. I really liked that song. And it's like throughout my life, nobody ever heard of that. And nobody knew that Kenny Rogers wasn't always some country and Western type of singer. And so I'm remembering Kenny Rogers as his attempt at psychedelic rock. So I had all these memories that were, not bad. And I wanted to tell you that little story because of that email I got, just this last week, Wednesday, maybe it was Thursday. And I could see how that would be a real question for some people. So yeah, you get hit with nostalgia once in a while, but for me, it's no different than it ever was. So we got that. So let's get on to some news. Let me check. What do we got? I was number 21 in the lottery. That's up there. Buenos dias. How you doing? How you, gang? Sam and Peg, how you doing? Counting down to arriving in Armenia for the summer. Nice. Chicago Papa. Good morning from Houston. Lisa Lord. Why does that name sound familiar? Good morning from Shreveport. Do I know you? Do I know you? I don't know. It sounds familiar. Okay. So, got a bit of news. Not a lot, but, well, I'll save taxi for the end. A point of pride here in Candio. Everything, live in Armenia. Candio is the department that Armenia's in. Well, I just put it up here. This lady, and Hella, she's born and raised in Candio, and she just became the vice president of Coca-Cola worldwide. So that's like the number 2 position in all of Coca-Cola. Pretty awesome. And of course, it made all the news here, at least here in Candio. It's pretty cool. Oh, by the way, I'm asked how Colombians look, and I tell you fairly often, Colombia's a melting pot. Colombians look. It really reminds me a lot of the United States, where on every street corner you're going to have a different ethnicity and different shades of people. And I mean, there's no such thing as a black person, no such thing as a white person. Everybody's various shades. It's like a spectrum. And I laugh to myself when people, they want me to kind of stereotype or pigeonhole people in Colombia. In Ecuador, you can somewhat do that. There's a certain look, and Peru is similar, but in Colombia, it's not like that at all. I mean, take your pick. It can be Afrocentric, it could be European-centric. It's a mixture of everything, Asian. So I just want to point that out. Stream of thought. Okay, what do we got next? What did I say last week? Was it last week when I was saying that there were only 2 serious accidents reported so far for the year? Here's just a couple clips that I pulled out from just this last week. Oh, I think I put this photo on a little bit longer than it should have been, but we'll keep going. Of course,
Vamos, pues arriba el conductor, señor. ¿Está bien? No, está muerto. Ahí bajo la carga.
Tenemos el conductor.
No, marica, yo vi, no. Yo, hermano, yo vi la...
No, pero además ya con el video de la moto. No, con el máximo, porque no tiene poder. Ahí van a llamar al conductor. No, y ahí nos van a llamar a la vehículo. Ah, pues que yo lo vendí.
Okay, so I guess everything averages out. There was another one. I couldn't find it. I'd seen this clip somewhere on Facebook that somebody had taken of an accident. I couldn't locate it. Wife and I coming to Armenia on Sunday. Maybe we could visit. Send me an email, and if you're free when I'm free, sure. Well, they really made things harder when you come to renew your cedula. Well, I have a friend who just like a couple weeks ago renewed his cedula, and I think he had to have a movement certificate, which isn't a big deal, but so I think that's new, but beyond that, I don't know. I can't find cheap tickets for the summer. Spirit Airline wants 800 to 1,000 round trip. I paid $450 last year. Yeah, I mentioned a few weeks ago that those prices are going to be going up. Inflation and popularity, those two things it's going to drive prices up. You have to renew the residencia too. I think you mean the movement certificate. That entails a whole bunch of paperwork. I don't know. I haven't renewed it in a while, so I can't say you're right or wrong. I can only say what my friend told me just recently, that it was no big deal. And movement certificate, I actually have to get it because I'm getting my residence visa. It's not, you just go get it. It's not a big deal unless you happen to get it when there's a line. My wife is from Barranquilla. She's been to the U.S. for 23 years. She wants to know if you think that Colombia follows a lead from America on social issues. Somewhat. There are definitely cues, and some people do, but Colombia is Colombia, so whatever it is, whether it's social issues or other things, they're going to have their own take on it. The interesting one is, it's a big thing in the United States about trans and male, female, and pronouns and all that kind of stuff. And it's laughable in a Latin culture because you're not going to change up the language that's based on gender. It's a gender language where English is not, or it's not to any large extent where, Spanish is entirely a gender driven language, which is why these things just make absolutely no sense. Like in the US, they got this big thing about Latinx, and it's a joke in any Latin country. The only people that are saying Latinx are wealthy liberals in the United States who, think they're doing something, and they're not, and they're laughed at by people that are of any kind of Spanish heritage and language. So, like I say, to some extent, yes. When you have the third largest population in the world, but the number one economy and military that's everywhere in the world, travels everywhere, you're going to have a huge influence. I mean, Rome had a huge influence in France and in England and Germany and all over that part of the world when Rome had its heyday. And the United States is the Rome of today, and it's going to have its influence. But it's not a follow in lockstep. And there's a funny thing in Colombia, and you can't say this with all the population, but if there's a country that has a real affinity, a desire to have a partnership with the United States, because throughout its history, it's had a good partnership with the United States, it's Colombia. And it's the United States that ebbs and flows on that, but there's a lot of people here that just have a natural affinity because they grew up that way. The history is that way. There's so many ties that people here are more aware of. When the United States, the average person, really, we have a history with Colombia. I mean, they really don't know. All they think of is, the 80s and the cartels and that kind of stuff. So you have that affinity to the United States, but when it comes to things like that, you're going to have some people that are going to, paint their hair purple and go off the deep end. And you're going to have the majority of people that just see it from afar for what it is, and, not really give it much more thought. And so you see some things pop up here and there, but nowhere near to the extent of the U.S. The U.S. has just kind of gone crazy, so it always, you're going to get that pendulum swing, and, hopefully it seems like maybe it's swinging back, but hopefully it kind of gets back to some kind of sanity soon. Okay, so what else we got? Oh, I mentioned last week that there's a renewed concern of the vid of the the pestilence of the plague. And this week, this was last week, this article, you really got to write news, right? So if they had concern last week, this week, the concern's gone. Condeo registered a reduction in the levels of contagion and mortality from the COVID-19. I think there's a total cases in all of Condeo. I think there's 4 registered cases. Nobody's dying. It never has been a big issue. The hospitals were never full. They were taking people from Cali and around. But I don't know. There's still some of the craziness here, even though the CDC, even, it's official that the masks don't do squat and that the vaccine is no better than natural immunity is actually better. All of those things that people were censored for and you weren't allowed to say, they've all been proven out. It's not even a question anymore. It is a fact. A lot of people had to backtrack on what they were preaching. It just became this political thing. You know, if somebody was wearing a mask, they're probably a lefty. And if they weren't wearing a mask, they're probably a righty, you know, and it just insanity stepped in. And it's funny, the people that were screaming about science were the ones that were mostly ignoring the science and censoring the scientists. But here, a lot of those things still linger. You'll still see people walking around, you know, with masks that actually think that they do something. There's still requirements. If you go into the hospital, you have to wear a mask. When my doctor came here, she wore a mask. Eventually I got her, well, I probably shouldn't say it, but I don't want to get her in trouble. But we talked about that and other things, and the health professionals here know that it's ridiculous. It depends on the kind of mask, and fitted masks are different than paper masks and all of that stuff. So there's still some lingering leftover craziness around it, but it's still kind of a non-issue, and I'm glad for that and hope it stays like that. I hope the world never goes back to that lunacy. Let's see, what do we got here? Okay, social issue. Dicey totally agreed with your answer and was very well explained. Oh, thanks. It's off the cuff. I have a lot of friends we talk about these kinds of things, but the history's there to read too. I'm so happy that I was here back in the day, 20 years ago, 22 years ago, whatever it was. I'm so glad I was there then to get perspective on today. It helps me almost on a daily basis. What do you think about America giving its sovereignty to the World Health Organization? And do you know if Colombia is going to be one of the countries to sign on to this? I'm of a mind that the jerks became a political organization, and on one hand, it's like disband them. They violated what their purpose in life is to be. On the other hand, you want to have a World Health Organization that's not involved in politics, not telling countries what they should or shouldn't do, but rather track these things, get in there and do the work. If you've got Ebola, you get in there and do the work. Stay out of the politics of it. So I think rather than give them something more, I think they need to be scaled back to their purpose. They don't need more influence and more power. I'd rather see them disbanded than that. The VP Coca-Cola is from Colombiana. Okay. from Kimbaya. Dan is Colombia. Okay. Now we'll get to the taxis. Let's see, I showed that. Yeah, okay. Now, my first trip back here from when I was living in Ecuador, my first trip back to Armenia, back to Colombia, there was a taxi strike. I've got some video of it, and at the border, there were no taxis. You had to walk into town, which was a real pain in the butt. Buses were running, and it was so striking because because of the taxi strike, you had the Ecuador, on one side of the bridge, you had the Ecuador military, and they were standing there with completely mismatched uniforms. It's like they got their uniforms out of a thrift shop. And I remember this one guy, he had these bright green Grinch Christmas socks on, and they were just kind of lounging around and ignoring everything except themselves. And then when you got to the Colombian side, you had these people that were lined up, impeccably dressed like military ninjas, riot helmets. They were all armed. They had flak vests. What do you call them? Personal armor. And they're not flak vests anymore. We call them flak vests back in the Stone Age. Can't believe that came to mind. So you had all these, you know, like they were sharp, you know, it's like parade ready. But as I walked by the Ecuador ones, they were just up amongst themselves. They're kind of a surly group. They weren't, you know, they weren't very friendly. And you get to the Colombian side, and although they're standing there all military dressed and looking, they're smiling and they're saying hello and they're, you know, wishing everybody good morning, how you doing? And it's like this is such a microcosm of one country versus this one's a mess, and they're just kind of miserable. And then you get to the, you know, all you Ecuadorians, I'm sorry, but you know, I lived there long enough to see daily what goes on there. And it was such a microcosm of contrast that I loved it. And I got a bit of video of that. So I get to Armenia, and that night around 8 o'clock, I walked down to Plaza Bolivar along 14, and there were all these people there as part of the protest. Now they had, it was a double protest. It was the taxis and it was teachers. Teachers, you know, we don't get paid enough, you know, it's the same everywhere. And the taxis at the time were protesting the price of gasoline. It was at a high point back then. But the protests being Armenia were all these people, families, and they were playing music and they were dancing and everybody's drinking and partying and having a good time. And it's like, oh yeah, there's a taxi strike going on. I mean, it's like a big excuse for a party. And all those protests that exploded in Cali and in Bogota, here it was the same thing. You know, people were marching down the street, dancing and singing and having a good old time. You know, when I did that video walking through one of the protest marches, somebody asked me a message or email or something, weren't you afraid? Why would I be afraid? I mean, if anything happened, there'd be 50 people to help me. No, I wouldn't be afraid. But we had taxi protests began on the 22nd, scheduled, and it was a strike. So none of the taxis were running. Didn't know how long it would be. It ended up being for 2 days. So you either walked or took a bus or stayed home. And They ended it pretty quick. They had 18 points. Some were like inconsequential, but they were concerned with gasoline because there's a move to have newer, less polluting cars, and in some places, even this is countrywide. In some places, even switching to hybrids or electric or whatever. So there's a push to do that. And they're saying, well, how are we ever going to do that if, you know, if our fares are throttled and regulated and gasoline gets more expensive and you have these illegal so-called Ubers stealing our business, how are we ever going to get to that point? And so their number one concern, I think their number two is the gasoline, but their number one were these non-regulated, illegal operations. And they pointed out, look, we have existing laws that you can't publicly transport people unless you're part of a regulated system to do so. And so last week or the week before, when I went on my tirade about Ubers and why I think they're disgusting, then the taxi thing came. I didn't even realize it was coming up. But they had this national strike, and that was their big issue. Here in Armenia, they have a number of my friends. They say, "Well, I'm taking an Uber." Local people. I said, "But there is no Uber." Well, here they don't even. They're not even Uber with the app, which is here. It's just they're up on a WhatsApp page, and you just send them a WhatsApp message, and they come and pick you up, and it's a real scourge. I mean, if you're invested in being a legal business and you've got people that are making the basic similar charges and they don't have to pay anything like you have to pay, you might as well just run your taxis out of business. So there's that. Let me show you a couple clips. One's from Bogota, the rest are from Armenia.
Decidido no seguir en la protesta, retirarnos y tener una reunión virtual en horas de la tarde con los distintos líderes de cada zona para mirar a ver qué acciones vamos a tomar.
Responsabilizamos al gobierno nacional de la sanguinaria forma en que trató hoy al gremio de los taxis. Estábamos organizados, estábamos pacíficos y llegaron a rompernos, a inmovilizarnos, a llevarse a la gente presa porque él quiere legalizar las plataformas. Esto es responsabilidad del gobierno nacional y mira atrás cómo nos tiene. Listos para rompernos y estamos tranquilos y en santa paz y no le estamos jodiendo la vida a nadie. Esto es por culpa del gobierno nacional.
Yeah, you didn't want to be out driving in that either. They're blocking roads and all of that. So, it happens almost once a year. It kind of got lost in other protests last year, but it's a pretty common thing. Now, I want to show you something. Since I've been healthy, I was setting aside the contributions that were sent because I haven't had anything break down, and so I keep a little pot, and that pot was growing. And I decided that I was going to get something that I didn't have to have because things blew up, but I hadn't had one in about 5 or 6 years. The last one I had was in Ecuador, and I sold it for $1,400 to put money into the foundation, San Martin Foundation, because I didn't have a lot of extra money, so I could sell the drone and give it a pretty good boost, and so I did that. And I haven't been able to purchase another one since, so I got that one. It's got the little flappy propellers on it. Boom, 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 boom. Here we go. It's got behind this cover, it's got a Sony camera. It's not a DJI. Kind of wish it was, but that was a little out of my budget. I could have gotten the Mini. That was only about $30 more. But the Mini, it lacks a few things that this actually has. And this is a copy of the Mavic, the actual Mavic. The only thing this doesn't have is obstacle avoidance, but it's got everything else. It's got more features in the software than I'll ever use. But the Sony camera, it's got an amazing 4K Sony camera on it. And since the whole point for me was to have a good quality camera, and it's a 3-axis gimbal. What the funny thing is with the DJI Mini, it's a 2-axis gimbal, but it also has the electronic stabilization. The problem with that is for it to work, it has to crop the edges. And so you can think you have something, and then you go to edit and you find out it got cropped out. This has 3-axis gimbal, so I don't have to worry about that. And so in a lot of ways, it was almost tailor-made for what I need. And so I got that. It comes in a nice carrying case. So those who contributed, see where some of your money went. Trying to get ready for the end of March and into April when I can start getting out and traveling again. I'm trying to set things up now. Can't wait to get out there. I miss it a lot. There's a lot of things that are happening right now. I'm trying to accomplish some things that have to get done. That everything went on hold for those months when I was so sick. And I've got some people that are going to be coming in, so I have to, schedule those days. Because they want me to spend some time with them, pick them up at the airport and that kind of thing. So soon I'll be able to get out on the road again. And if you have anything, again, if you have any topics you want me to cover during coffee time, let me know. If there's any place within a day or a weekend of where I am, because that'll be my first batch, will be either weekend or day trips. With the exception, I still need to get that Bucaramanga second visit going. But right now, I just don't know. I've set it up and canceled it so many times. Hotel's paid for, just sitting there waiting. So that's what'll be going on. Now, do we have any? Well, let me make it official. Anytime asking your questions. Remember, 4 question marks first, then ask the question. Okay, now it's official. Do you have any questions, comments, anything on any of these news items? Do you have anything on nostalgia? I don't know. Some of you probably think, you know, what was the point of that? That's kind of crazy. But I think back, my retirement was kind of forced retirement. That was the cancer thing, and I stopped working before I should have had to, and spent the last few years in bed. I wasn't even, I think I was 59 when it all began. When I had to stop working, maybe 60, somewhere in there. Several years I couldn't, it was 59. Because when I got healthy and moved to Ecuador, my Social Security hadn't even started yet. But that was, I was making all that online consulting money, so it didn't really matter. But I had a lot of thoughts, you know, what'll it be like to retire? I mean, I was such a workaholic through my entire life. I mean, I started at 10. There was hardly a time when I didn't have at least some side thing going on, aside from major jobs. And, you know, it's like, when that all ends, what's it going to be like? Am I going to sit around and mope for the past, or, you know, mope for the good old days? I've had those questions myself. So I guess that's why that message I got hit home, and I wanted to address it. All right, so are you guys still there? Are there any questions at all? Questions, comments? I'm not getting any, so I'm guessing no. We could always end it soon, but there's no Buffalo Bills game. I mean, there's always next year. That's the slogan, you know, of the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills, there's always next year. What's up with the contribution link? It looks like I have to create an account to use it now. I don't know. Juki used it. I'm not familiar with that. It may ask you to, but I think you could skip by where it asks you. You've used it a lot. I don't know. I'll look at it when this is over. If they made a change, they didn't tell me. The issue of retiring in another country is that you need someone in USA to do some errands on your behalf. That's absolutely true. At least for a period of time, for a few years. And then if you make any big changes, you're going to want that, unless you want to drop the big bucks to fly back and do it yourself. Me, I just don't even want to leave here. I'm finding inflation is soaring into the stratosphere at the grocery store. What about Armenia? It's actually been somewhat holding. The canary for me is eggs. That's why I'm always mentioning eggs, because they seem to be relatively volatile in pricing. And the pricing of eggs have been relatively, I mean, they burst up a couple times, got up to 11,000 pesos for a dozen eggs, and they've been staying there for a while now. Most everything has been stabilized. So I don't know. You know, I think it'll keep going, but it honestly isn't hurting me because the exchange rate is still in my favor. So even as the inflation went up, so did the exchange rate, and it really kept me on the plus side. I'm even with the inflation, I'm better off right now than I was 3 years ago. So I don't know, but it's predicted to continue to go up. Last year, it was overall 16.5, I think I just read. The final figures came in, and that's what they said. But the real killer has been gasoline and utilities. Utilities, Utilities, the electric has been stinging a little bit, but then you have to put it in perspective. You know, I find myself paying about, geez, it's up to, for me, about $50. So you're sitting there in the US and you're going, what, a 3-bedroom, 4-bathroom house for $50? Well, yeah, but it should be half that. Yeah, I get it. But remember that I say everything is like 4 times. But even then, $200 electric bill in the US, not all that horrible for a house. But, you know, if you're here, you're living on the economy, you're budgeting everything on the economy. I'm not making the kind of money you're making in the US. And so, you know, for me, it's kind of shocking because that's money that I have to spend that would have stayed in my pocket. So some things, yeah. Why you don't like CCR? It's great music. I don't know. Never really cared much for it, but there's a couple songs that I like. But for the most part, no. I always found them to be kind of noisy. You know, that's why we have choices. I remember the song just dropped in. Was in The Big Lebowski. Was it? I don't remember that. I did see that movie. It was a great movie, but I was probably bouncing around in my chair when that came on. I just don't remember. What type of cancer did you have? Aggressive spindle cell melanoma. It was in the lymph system. I can't get comments to work. I don't know. Let me test. Well, working for me. Let's see. Rent or buy an apartment if you want to live out your days in Armenia. Rent. And maybe forever rent. Things change. What is good when you get a place might not be so great a year from now. You got a year's lease, and there's something to be said for being able to have the freedom to move here, move there, move there. It can actually enhance your enjoyment. After you've gone through that, maybe a year or two, if you find a place and you really know it well enough to picture your life there for the rest of your life, then go ahead and do it. But it's very easy to make a mistake, particularly in another country. In the United States, it's easy to make a mistake from one state to the next because of you're just not that familiar, and what you think is perfect turns out, yeah, I wish I had known XYZ. Well, it's like that here, only more so. So don't be in a hurry to do it. Rent's cheap. So there's no financial motivation to do it. So sit tight, enjoy the freedom of being able to move around. There's always next year is also a slogan for the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, but the Dallas Cowboys actually had some Super Bowls that they won. For us, it's always been there's always next year. There's never been a break in it. So as much as Dallas Cowboys suck and as much as the Bills are really good right now, it's still our slogan. I was interested in moving back to the Medellin area, but we spent 2 different weeks there looking around, and there's no for rent signs anywhere. We'll go to the buildings and ask the security guard. Prices are way too high there. You can find a deal, but it's considerably more. I'd say it's maybe 40% more expensive in general to be in Medellin. 40%, something like that. How old are you? You're not supposed to ask somebody that. I'm old enough. It appears the demand has outstripped the supply. I dropped enough hints, you should be able to figure it out. For now, we're not moving. Anybody familiar with the Medellin housing market? Yeah, it's well, you know, you could look at a place like Rio Negro or something around there, but why would you want to? I don't know. They each their own. I just don't like big cities. I don't like pollution. I don't like the kind of traffic they have. I just don't. I don't see it. You know, if I'm going to move to a city, because here you say Armenia is a city. It doesn't feel like a city. It feels like a community. But if I'm going to move to a city, I'm going to go to Manizales, where I've got all the things, you know, all the modern type things that I could possibly want, but not the problems that you have in Medellin. And crime has been skyrocketing there. I mean, it's getting bad. So I mean, that's something to consider. Oh, you CCR guys, I'll tell you. Now CCR, they did Suzy Q, right? I love that song. Dan, can you find places? That was my first Spanish-speaking girlfriend named Susie, and she dragged me. Well, let's not go there. Can you find places, but we'll have to overpay? Yeah, that's about it. The apartment from something guy last week did ever go. I'm not sure what you're asking me. Sometimes buy one egg, get the quarter tienda for 500 pesos. You know, a fascinating thing is more so in Ecuador, but my first experience of this was in Ecuador, where you go up and you get, let's say you want to get some aspirin. So you go to buy a bottle of aspirin, and they give you one aspirin because they're so used to people coming and just buying the bare minimum of what they need. So here's your aspirin for peanuts, for pennies. They say, no, I want a bottle. They don't even sell bottles. You might get a box of 10 or 20 or something. Well, you come to Colombia, and some of the pharmacies will break it down. Like if you're a smoker, you can buy single cigarettes. There's certain medications you can buy single pills of, but they have smaller boxes for, like, I get a pain in my shoulder once in a while, and I find that Aleve makes it disappear. Like within 20 minutes, it's gone. So I keep it on hand. But when I buy the Aleve, it comes in little bubble pop things. I don't know what you call them. And I think there's only 10 in the box. So you have a lot of things scaled down. And then a lot of things are like, if a common prescription is take one a day for a month, well, there'll be a month's worth, you know, there'll be 30 in the package. But you can do things like buy an egg. You can buy a carrot, things like that. So it's kind of cool in that sense. Particularly if you're living alone, you don't necessarily, I go through a fair amount of eggs, so I'll get a dozen eggs and use them up in the week. But if you don't go through a lot of eggs, you might just buy a couple and you're good for a while. Exchange rate went back up close to 5,000. Gas should be cheap importing from Venezuela. Not so much. Colombia has its own gas. The information about gas being imported from Venezuela is actually the black market. It's not an official exchange of gasoline. Colombia has its own oil and produces its own gasoline, and they don't need to buy it elsewhere. But you have a black market, particularly along the border of Venezuela, where people will come across in gallon cans or gallon bottles. Sometimes they'll even fill up these trash bags and carry them over, because it's like pennies for a gallon. and then they turn around and they'll sell it in nearby cities for dirt cheap. My friend there,
I really like it.
Afro Wahira, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, she did a video on that very topic. She went to the town that's the most notorious, and you have nothing but gasoline stands as far as the eye can see. And it's an interesting video. So you might want to check that out. Cosmos Factory. Do condos in Colombia charge monthly maintenance fees like in the US? Yes, but the owner of those condos pays it. It's part of the rent. Just like the taxes are. So if you're an owner, you'll pay that separate. You'll pay the taxes separate. Always next year for the Bills and the Vikings. No, it's the Bills. Dolphins are happy making the first round, getting knocked out, and call it a successful season. Well, you know, if you've been down for a while, that's the way it goes. And the odds of winning a Super Bowl are so ridiculous. It's crazy. I mean, every year you've got 2 or 3 teams that if they played on a different day could have won. You know, that's how it goes. It matters. Problem with Medellin, there are lots of expats, foreigners coming, driving prices up rapidly. Kind of always have been, but they're returning. But yeah, there's tens of thousands of people coming in throwing money around like it has no value, and it definitely causes problems, and it's part of why the crime is getting so bad there, because as they're driving those prices up, they're driving it up for them, but they're also driving it up to local people that don't have those same incomes, and it makes it hard to live. Is their best, but you're still stuck on those guys. Good morning. When will you post the contact information from your doctor? I will be moving to Colombia hopefully within a few months. Send me an email. Sorry about that. I actually forgot about it. Do you have anyone you could recommend helping me to get my pension visa? There's not a lot to it, but I can tell you the one that I use in Pereira has been fine for me. Send me an email. I'll send you that business card, and I'll send you the information of the doctor. 2 weeks ago, there was a guy on the chat looking to rent out his apartment that he lives 2 months a year. Yeah, that was last week. Yeah, I remember that, but I don't know anything about it. I never got any information on it. I forget what she said about it, but I think she said she'd lived there 2 months in the last 4 years, and it's near me, but I never got any more information than what you saw in chat. How's the weather been this year? I remember last year it seemed to be very wet and rainy, so coffee yields are effect. Coffee's doing fine. Weather's great. We're back to normal. It's been pretty perfect. Vikings, 4 Super Bowl appearance, 0 wins. Yeah, but we had 4 in a row. Tell you, that's way more frustrating. Medellin, the next Costa Rica. Yeah, Medellin is not Colombia. I mean, it is, but it isn't. It's if all you ever saw was Medellin, then you really don't know what Colombia is. You don't know what it's so changed. It's so different. It's so dollar dependent. It's just yeah. That's something I'm not crazy about there either. When I was in Ecuador, I was never comfortable with being, pointed out as a foreigner, gringo. Gringo is not a bad term in South America. I know some of you get worked up because of Mexico. It's an insult, but here it's not. It's really just another word for foreigner. It doesn't even mean white European. I mean, it can be, well, anyone can be a gringo, really. But in Ecuador, they're so stratus driven that you're identified by whatever group you might be in, and then you're treated accordingly. And although my stratus was, you know, at the top, I hated it. I hate to be pigeonholed like that. And where here in Armenia in particular, it's not everywhere in Colombia is necessarily like this, but here in Armenia, they don't give a crap. This is a blue collar working class town, and they don't look at people and go, "Oh wow, you must be better because you have some money." They're not like that. It's like, you know, we're all the same, and I'm much more comfortable living that way. I much prefer it. Where in Medellin, I mean, you stand out like a sore thumb, and it's, you know, it's like, oh, there's a potential target. Yeah, it means foreigner. You could be a Colombian American or descendant and be called a gringo. That's absolutely true. Yeah, it's a different meaning in Mexico. I completely understand from the times that I spent a lot of time in Mexico, and many dozens of trips in Mexico. And I get, you know, it's like whenever I would see it there, it was like spoken with disdain, almost like they spit while they say it, a gringo, you know. It's like, it's just such a negative connotation. And when you get to South America and you hear it, you don't have that same connotation. It's just a word. And it's funny how they love to be descriptive. And this was hilarious. I wish I had caught this on, I wish I'd pulled my camera out, but you don't know. And then the moment's gone. But it was such a typical thing. I was in line for something, and there was a line next to me. Not a long line, but, you know, a couple people, and there was one next to me. And the person behind the counter called the second girl. Basically, she said, "Hey, come here, fat. Come here, gordita." You know, and she was fat. And she looked. She's a fat girl. Called her fat. It wasn't insulted at all by it. You know, it's kind of hard to explain. It's almost an endearing term. It's like, but you know, try to pull that in the U.S. You know, stand in line at McDonald's and see this big heifer back there and say, "Hey, fatty, come on up here," and it's, that wouldn't go over very well. But here it's better to be called gringo than extranjero. I don't know. I don't care either way. To me, it has more to do with the intent of what people are saying. And when I know that there's no ill intent to these words, and when I see that example and others used on a daily basis amongst themselves, you know, it's like there's no ill will intended. You don't have so much of that backbiting kind of stuff going on. Everything's more just kind of out in the open, and it's a given that it's more of a pleasantry. So, yeah, there's no reason to have a thin skin. What do you call it? What do you call them in the U.S. now? Snowflake. Yeah. Okay, we're going to wrap it up here. So last call. Some theorize that gringo is short for green go home to American soldiers. Yeah, nobody actually knows. I've dug on this. I'd always heard that it was Green Grows the Grass of Home, which was a popular song back around the Spanish-American War, but found out that wasn't it. There's an indigenous word in Mexico that some attribute it to changing the pronunciation. There's some people that say it goes back to Spain centuries ago. There's a lot of theories, but the truth is nobody really knows. And the one in Spain predates all the ones in Mexico and the war and that song. So it couldn't really be that. It just goes back to the point where nobody really knows for sure, which one it is. People use endearment terms like fatty, skinny, negro, negra, negrita. Yeah, and especially the ita for, if it's a female. So if it's, you don't say gorda, you say gordita. Negrita is, it's almost like you say that to a white girl, but it's almost like a clan. It's like an endearment. You're part of a clan kind of thing. It has nothing to do with color, really. It's chino is used in Bogota to mean kid, but it would be considered offensive. Yeah, it's different. And, if you have a thin skin, maybe Colombia's, not the place for you. I just say, be a little patient, get used to the way things are. Don't have a thin skin. And once you really know the people here, you kind of automatically know that it wasn't whatever it was. If you never heard it before and it seems offensive, it wasn't put out with the intent of being offensive. You can kind of trust in the people here. And, and if it was, you'll certainly know it in the tone of voice and that kind of thing. But you never really get that because they tend to be so ingrained with a certain level of politeness, a certain level of formality that in most of Colombia, where that's just not how you act, Don't let their grandmother ever hear them say that, or they'll get whipped. Okay, we're gonna end it here. So thanks for indulging me, you guys, on the nostalgia thing. I hope it answers the question that I got. And I'm sure there's more of you that were wondering about that. I don't feel retirement, but then this is my work. This is, this kind of stuff. So I would definitely say if you're going to go into retirement, definitely have something planned and give yourself, schedules to do certain things, at least to work towards. But my whole life has been that, so it's not about to change. All right, so I'm going to go. I want to thank you guys. Thanks for always being there. Thanks for the help with the drone. I really appreciate it. And see you next week.